Hey, everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Look, first off, a huge congratulations to our newly appointed board members. Earning a seat at the table is a massive achievement, so definitely take a second to celebrate that. But, as we're going to see today, with all that prestige comes some very real, very strict legal mandates. We're going to unpack your exact requirements under the newly amended Code of Corporate Governance so you know exactly what to expect, and more importantly, how to lead effectively.
Here's a quick look at our roadmap for today. We'll be hitting the ground rules, mandatory board composition, the 3 voting categories, navigating elections, and we'll wrap up with your key board responsibilities.
All right, let's jump right into Section 1, the ground rules. We are looking at comply versus mandatory.
Before we get into the weeds, you really have to understand the underlying philosophy of the regulatory code you're bound by now. It operates on a pretty strict contrast. First, you have the comply or explain approach. This means for certain discretionary rules, you either comply or you have to do some serious explaining to your shareholders in your financial statements. But do not confuse those with the mandatory provisions. Mandatory means strict compliance, no excuses. Breaching these leads straight to penal proceedings under Regulation 37, and, well, nobody wants that on their corporate resume. Moving right along to Section 2, the roster, mandatory board composition.
Let's talk hard numbers, starting with the absolute baseline, 1. Whenever your board is reconstituted, it must have a minimum of at least 1 female director. This isn't just a suggestion or a nice-to-have. It's a firm, non-negotiable legal requirement built right in to ensure diversity at the highest levels of corporate oversight. Next up is independence. It's totally mandatory that independent directors make up at least 2 members or 1/3 of the board, whichever number happens to be higher. And yeah, if you get a fraction, you have to round up. Plus, to make it all official, they actually have to submit a formal declaration of independence to the chairman at the very first meeting after the election.
On the flip side of that, to make sure independent oversight actually works in practice, your executive directors, and yes, that explicitly includes the CEO, cannot exceed 1/3 of your total board composition. That rule essentially guarantees that the vast majority of your board remains independent and non-executive.
Which brings us to Section 3. The draft, the 3 voting categories.
So, the law now actually requires 3 distinct voting categories: female, independent, and other. Look closely at how this breaks down. While the specific seats up for election in each category are capped, like 1 seat for the female category and 2 or 1/3 for independent, there is 0 restriction on the total number of female or independent directors that can be elected across the whole board. The caps are just for those specific buckets. Meaning, the big takeaway here is that shareholders don't just cast a single blanket vote anymore. They now cast their votes separately for each category. A shareholder's available votes are literally divided up in proportion to the available seats in that specific bucket. It's a real game changer because it fundamentally shifts the strategy and the mechanics of how board elections actually play out.
All right, let's dive into Section 4, navigating the election process. Here's the exact legal countdown you need to memorize. 14 days out, a candidate files their notice of intention and explicitly states which of the 3 categories they're contesting. Then, by the 7-day mark, the company takes the wheel. They absolutely must transmit the meeting notice and publish an ad in both nationwide English and Urdu newspapers detailing all the candidate profiles.
The ground mechanics are pretty straightforward. You file, the company vets, and then we get to the election itself. But here's a really interesting catch. If the number of candidates who step forward exactly equals the number of open seats in a specific category, boom, they're legally elected unopposed. There's no voting even required for that category. Now, as a board, you also carry an active legal duty to facilitate minority shareholders who might want to contest these elections. You literally have to annex their candidate statements to the official company notices, provide them with any necessary shareholding info, and supply additional proxy forms at the company's expense if they ask for it. Basically, you are legally bound to ensure a fair playing field.
Finally, Section 5, the game, your keyboard responsibilities.
So, you won the election. What now? Well, the job isn't just showing up to meetings and drinking the boardroom coffee, it's proactive governance. You're responsible for establishing risk management and sound internal controls. You have to enforce a formal code of conduct, conduct annual evaluations of your own board's performance, and maintain absolutely critical policies, like robust whistleblowing and anti-harassment mechanisms that comply with workplace laws.
And look at this. Under the updated Regulation 10A, modern corporate governance is brought directly into your purview. Diversity, equity, inclusion, and sustainability. They are no longer optional corporate social responsibility buzzwords. They are mandatory, strategic board-level duties.
You're legally on the hook to govern climate risks and specifically assess their financial impact on the company. You've got to ensure gender equity in the workforce and set concrete sustainability targets. Also, the board is highly encouraged to form a dedicated sustainability committee, which, by the way, must include at least one female director, to oversee this whole process and report progress annually.
All of these responsibilities filter down into your subcommittees too, especially the vital audit committee. This is your ultimate safeguard for financial reporting and corporate integrity. The rules mandate a minimum of 3 non-executive members, an independent chairman who is not the chairman of the overall board, and at least one member who meets the strict definition of being financially literate. Oh, and they have to convene at least once every single quarter. Lastly, there's the matter of your own personal qualifications. Unless you happen to possess 14 years of higher education alongside 15 years of specific board experience, getting an official director certification within your first year is a mandatory requirement. You literally have to go back to school to keep your seat at the table. So the rules are crystal clear, and as we discussed at the very beginning, the penalties for failing these mandatory provisions are incredibly real. The only question left to answer is this: are you ready to shoulder this burden? Are you going to use this framework to just tick the boxes and merely comply, or will you use it to truly lead your organization forward into a sustainable and equitable future? Thank you so much for joining us for this explainer, and seriously, good luck in the boardroom.